Patra Whitmore walked into a bustling shopping mall with her two teenage daughters, expecting nothing more than a typical day of shopping. Instead, she found herself navigating an unsettling experience that turned everything she thought she knew about prejudice upside down. What happens when the roles are reversed and someone faces discrimination in the most unexpected way? Patra's story will challenge everything you believe about fairness and justice. The mall was a spectacle of modern commerce, a labyrinth of stores boasting colorful window displays and neon signs. The air was perfumed with the scent of food courts, serving everything from fresh pretzels to spicy chicken wings. Shoppers moved with purpose, their footsteps echoing against the polished floors. Sale signs hung in nearly every store window, promising steep discounts on everything from designer jeans to home decor. The lingerie store that caught Patra's attention was no exception. Inside, racks of bras, panties, and loungewear overflowed, some items even spilling onto the floor. It was clear the store was struggling to keep up with the influx of eager customers. The sounds of hangers scraping against metal racks mixed with excited chatter, creating an atmosphere that was equal parts chaotic and exhilarating. Patra, a soft-spoken and thoughtful woman in her mid-40s, was the epitome of composure. Her daughters, both teenagers, hovered near her, chatting excitedly about the items they hoped to find. Patra's intent was clear: to find what they needed, stay within budget, and perhaps pick up a few extra items to donate. It was a routine she had done countless times before, a small but meaningful way to give back to her community. As she browsed, Patra couldn't help but notice the staff. Most of the sales clerks were young black women, moving swiftly to manage the crowd. Their energy was palpable, their smiles warm as they assisted customers. Yet there were moments, fleeting but noticeable, when Patra felt eyes on her. Glances exchanged between staff members, whispers that stopped when she looked their way. She told herself not to overthink it. After all, everyone was busy, and the store was packed. But the subtle tension lingered, like a faint hum she couldn't quite tune out. Patra continued to shop, meticulously selecting items and ensuring her daughters found what they needed. The pile in her arms grew heavier, but she didn't mind. This was her routine, her way of caring for her family and giving back. She didn't know it yet, but this ordinary day would soon spiral into an experience she would never forget. One that would leave her questioning not just the actions of others, but the very fabric of justice and prejudice in society. With their arms full of carefully chosen items, Patra and her daughters made their way toward the checkout line. It was longer than she expected, stretching nearly to the back of the store. Patra glanced at her daughters, who were already beginning to look weary, and sighed. "We're almost there," she said, offering them a reassuring smile as they joined the end of the line. The sound of muffled conversations and the clinking of hangers filled the air around them. Shoppers shuffled forward at a slow pace, their patience waning as the minutes ticked by. The line moved sluggishly, inching forward every few minutes. Patra shifted the weight of the items she carried, feeling the straps of her bag dig into her shoulder. Her daughters fidgeted beside her, alternating between chatting softly and checking their phones. Despite the delay, Patra tried to keep her composure, reminding herself that this was part of the shopping experience during a big sale. Ahead of them, a woman with blonde hair tied in a messy bun stood clutching a few items. Her posture radiated frustration, her eyes darting between the register and the clock on the wall. She had been waiting for what seemed like an eternity, just like everyone else in line. Finally, her turn came, and she stepped forward with a palpable sense of relief. The clerk behind the counter greeted her with a smile that was more perfunctory than warm. She was young, probably in her mid-20s, with striking features and an air of confidence. Her movements were precise, her voice polite, but tinged with an unmistakable edge. There was something about her demeanor that commanded attention, a mix of charm and sharpness that made her difficult to ignore. The blonde woman placed her items on the counter and let out a small sigh. "I've been standing here for 20 minutes, she said, her tone calm but firm. "Why can't you just ring me up?" The clerk's expression shifted subtly, the corners of her mouth tightening as she responded. "This register is only for certain purchases. she said matter-of-factly. "You'll have to go over there." The woman blinked, confusion flickering across her face. "But I've been waiting here just like everyone else. Why can't I check out here?" The clerk's gaze didn't waver. "Rules are rules," she said, her voice devoid of emotion as she gestured toward another register across the store. The blonde woman hesitated, glancing at the other register and then back at the clerk. Her shoulders slumped, and she muttered something under her breath as she gathered her items and walked away. Patra watched her retreat, the tension in the air growing thicker with each passing second. The clerk's demeanor changed almost instantly as she turned to the next customer, a black woman who was greeted with a warm smile and an enthusiastic tone. The shift was subtle but undeniable. Patra's daughters, seemingly oblivious to the interaction, continued to chat quietly beside her, but Patra couldn't ignore what she had just witnessed. She glanced at the clerk again, her unease growing. The interaction with the blonde woman had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, one that would only deepen as the day unfolded. As the line crawled forward, Patra and her daughters finally reached the counter. The young clerk's smile returned, though its warmth felt hollow. Patra placed her carefully chosen items on the counter, her arms grateful for the relief. "Good afternoon," Patra said, her voice polite but weary. The clerk barely glanced at her. "Credit or debit?" she asked curtly. "Credit," Patra replied, handing over her card. She adjusted her footing, her daughters standing silently beside her, observing the interaction. The clerk swiped the card and frowned. "Your card's been declined," she said flatly, holding it out to Patra. Patra blinked in confusion. "That can't be right. There's no issue with my card." "It's declined," the clerk repeated, her tone firm. "You'll need to go upstairs to customer service to sort it out." Patra felt her cheeks flush as she took the card back. "All right," she said quietly, trying to maintain her composure. She turned to her daughters. "Stay here with the items. I'll be right back." Making her way through the crowded store, Patra climbed the escalator to the customer service desk. The attendant greeted her with a pleasant smile. "How can I help you?" the attendant asked. Patra handed over her card. "The clerk downstairs said my card was declined. Can you check if there's an issue?" The attendant ran the card and then looked up, puzzled. "Your card's fine. No issues here." Patra's confusion deepened. Then why would the clerk say otherwise? The attendant shook her head. "I'm not sure. You can use it without any problems." Returning to the counter, Patra felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "My card is fine," she said firmly, handing it back to the clerk. The clerk barely looked up. "Well, in that case, you'll need to write a check," she said dismissively. Patra's jaw tightened, but she complied, pulling out her checkbook. As she signed, a growing sense of humiliation began to bubble under her calm exterior. The clerk took the check, locked it in the drawer, and then glanced around the counter. "I don't know where your bag is," she said casually. "It must have been moved. Maybe someone put it back on the shelves." Patra's patience snapped. "What do you mean you don't know where it is? I left it right here." The clerk shrugged, her indifference palpable. "You'll have to find it." Patra stared at her, stunned. The tension she had been suppressing was now a roaring flame. She looked around and noticed another white customer standing nearby, visibly upset. The woman leaned over and whispered to another shopper, "I've never felt so unwelcome in a store before." Patra's heart pounded. She could no longer stay silent. "I need to see the manager," she said loudly, her voice carrying over the hum of the store. Heads turned, and the energy in the room shifted. Moments later, a poised, elegantly dressed black woman in her mid-30s appeared. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the escalating tension. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice steady but commanding. Patra met her gaze, her voice trembling with frustration. "Yes, I believe your clerk is treating me differently." The manager's brow furrowed as she listened to Patra recount the sequence of events. Each detail seemed to add another layer to her growing disbelief. She glanced at the clerk, who stood motionless, her expression carefully neutral. "You said your card was declined?" the manager asked, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "Yes," Patra replied. "But when I went upstairs to customer service, they confirmed there was nothing wrong with it. And then she insisted I write a check, only to tell me my items had disappeared." The manager's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned to the clerk, her eyes narrowing. "Is this true?" The clerk shrugged, her nonchalance almost defiant. "I don't know what happened. The card didn't work, and the bag wasn't here when I looked." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The manager's gaze didn't waver as she addressed the clerk. "Check the drawer for her check. Now." Reluctantly, the clerk opened the drawer and retrieved the check. The manager inspected it, then handed it back to Patra. "I'll take care of this personally," she said. "Please wait here." The manager disappeared briefly, returning with Patra's missing bag in hand. "I found these on a shelf near the back," she explained. "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. Let me process your purchase myself." Patra felt a wave of relief, though it was tinged with lingering frustration. As the manager rang up her items, she offered a heartfelt apology. "I can't begin to express how sorry I am for what you've experienced today. This is not how we conduct business." "Thank you," Patra said softly, her voice steadied by the manager's sincerity. "I appreciate your help." As she left the store, her daughters walking quietly beside her, Patra couldn't help but reflect on the events. The tension, the humiliation, and the stark contrast in how she had been treated. It all lingered, refusing to fade away. For the young clerk, the day had begun like any other, but the confrontation with Patra had left a bitter taste in her mouth. As she leaned against the counter, her mind wandered back to memories she thought she had buried long ago. She had grown up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce and prejudice was a constant shadow. Her parents, both factory workers, had spent their lives trying to shield her from the harsh realities of systemic discrimination. But there were some things even their love and sacrifices couldn't protect her from. She remembered being a little girl, walking to school and hearing the taunts from other children. They called her names she barely understood, but she knew they weren't kind. Teachers seemed to dismiss her struggles, often labeling her as difficult or unmotivated, instead of recognizing the challenges she faced. In high school, things only got worse. She excelled in her classes, but her achievements were often met with skepticism. "Are you sure she didn't cheat?" she overheard one teacher whisper to another after she aced a math exam. Those words stayed with her, a reminder that no matter how hard she worked, she would always have to prove herself twice over. Her first job at a local diner was supposed to be her escape, but even there, the stares and muttered comments from certain customers reminded her that she didn't belong. One evening, a patron refused to let her take their order, demanding that a white waitress serve them instead. Her manager had complied, apologizing to the customer while ignoring the tears welling up in her eyes. These experiences had shaped her, hardening her resolve but also distorting her perspective. She began to view the world through a lens of us versus them, seeing every interaction as a battle for dignity and respect. When she joined the store as a clerk, she felt a sense of pride working in a space where people like her were in charge. It was their domain, a place where they could set the rules. But somewhere along the way, her pride had turned into resentment. She saw customers like Patra not as individuals, but as symbols of a system that had belittled and excluded her. Her actions weren't about Patra personally. They were about reclaiming power in a world that had stripped her of it. Yet, as she replayed the events of the day in her mind, doubt began to creep in. Had she gone too far? The look in Patra's eyes as she demanded to see the manager wasn't one of entitlement, but of genuine hurt. The realization was unsettling, forcing her to confront the uncomfortable truth that prejudice wasn't a one-way street. For the first time, she wondered if her fight for justice had crossed a line, becoming the very thing she despised. Days later, as Patra sat at her kitchen table scrolling through her phone, a notification caught her attention. It was a news article shared on a local community page, detailing an incident at the very store she had visited. The headline read, "Store clerk fired after allegations of discrimination." Below it was a statement from the store's management, addressing the incident and affirming their commitment to providing a welcoming environment for all customers. Patra read on, learning that multiple complaints and video evidence from other customers had come to light. The store had acted swiftly, not only terminating the clerk's employment, but also implementing training sessions to prevent similar occurrences in the future. Patra set her phone down, her emotions a mixture of relief and sadness. She couldn't deny the justice in the outcome, but it didn't bring her joy. Instead, it left her reflective, thinking about the complexities of prejudice and how easily it could twist even the best intentions. Later that evening, as she and her daughters sat in the living room, the conversation naturally turned to the incident. "Mom," one of her daughters began hesitantly, "do you think she hated us because we were white?" Patra paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think hate is rarely that simple," she said softly. "She was wrong, yes, but hate doesn't fix hate. Only kindness and accountability can." Her daughters nodded, their expressions thoughtful. The room fell quiet, each of them lost in their own reflections. For Patra, the experience was a painful but necessary reminder that prejudice isn't confined to one group. It's a cycle that thrives on division and misunderstanding, and breaking it requires more than just justice. It requires empathy and a willingness to see the humanity in others, no matter how difficult that may be. Here brings us to the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. We want to hear your thoughts. Do you think the clerk's view of white people was justified, considering her own experiences with racism? Or do you believe her actions crossed a line? Let us know in the comments below. And what do you think about the concept of racism against white people? Share your opinions and stories in the comments. We look forward to hearing your perspectives on this thought-provoking topic. Thank you for watching.